show everybody our shirts. Well, if you didn't know, today is a From Software episode. I am very thrilled to have le retour de Robert Tui, my former conductor for my last opera performance. So today, our plan is to just listen to as much FromSoft music as possible within the time constraints given. I was given 378 options. We will not be listening to 378.
Oh my God.
Please update me on the games that you have played since the last time we spoke.
We'd mentioned that I had played through Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3.
Yes.
I had started Sekiro. At some point, I made a reference to feeling like I had a skill issue in that game, and you had clipped that excerpt. The comment section was really hilarious. They had a field day with that. This year, I had a break between a couple of opera productions, so I decided, okay, let's do it. So I played through Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. And then I played a new game plus of Dark Souls 3, largely because when I was playing 1, I realized that there were so many callbacks in 3 that I didn't quite appreciate my first time through.
And so you have not played Demon's Souls, you've not played Armored Core, and you've not played Bloodborne.
I know absolutely nothing about all of these games.
Let's dive in. One of the games that FromSoft is known for, I believe it was their first IP, if I recall correctly, is Kingsfield, which I don't really know anything about, and it's not a game that's ever really discussed as far as I know. This is a song called Dark Reality from Kingsfield 4.
It's super interesting to hear how far, in a way, video game music has come, and kind of how, obviously more recent games, they have more sort of technological capability. They can do stuff with music that involves much bigger orchestras, different textures. This has its own sort of old school kind of charm. I probably wouldn't put this track on my own kind of like gym playlist or something like that. I can see how it could function super well in the context of a game.
Kingsfield 4, I just looked it up, came out in 2001. We still get the essence of like the dark crypt moving around, like the soprano gives an inclination of like a shadow element or like a fear, you know what I mean? It's so interesting.
Because you have like a tremendous amount of echo in this.
There's a reverb on it.
Exactly. And so it kind of creates this, because they're obviously going for this gothic atmosphere, descending bass, this sort of like ongoing triplets, motion, a lot of reverb, and which sort of does give the sense of this sort of big space. When there's an organ that starts playing in some of these FromSoft video game tracks, I've found that you get this sort of gothic sort of feeling of it, but it also has a sort of like Phantom of the Opera, like a sort of twisted, Buxtehude on crack sort of feeling. One of those dragons in Elden Ring, I remember, has a huge, like a really prominent organ part. And it's quite amazing and super twisted, and it's pretty amazing.
Another sort of unknown game that someone mentioned was worth listening to was Deracine, which is by Yuka Kitamura from 2018, FromSoft VR game. And someone said that it was worth taking a listen to. This is the end credits theme. Wow. That's interesting. Apparently, there's a quotation from the Scarborough Fair, the classic folk song there. I don't hear it, but I don't think I know that piece. The dancing with the violins, especially, was just so the counterpoint and the shared melody there, that in the sort of call and response, it was a little slow, but it was interesting.
She's really very talented. She's super talented as a performer as well. You can feel that that's influenced her way of thinking about music, because this sort of contrapuntal writing where you have many lines at the same time,
the ebbing and flowing within each other. Yeah,
exactly. And the way they interact is really, is really nicely handled. And I also appreciate the fact that she has such a kind of a smooth feeling for the way harmony can evolve. It's in contrast to some of the other composers who are also super excellent in Fromsoft, but if you compare like the guy who wrote most of the music in Dark Souls 1, you have many more sort of like jagged changes of harmony.
Oh, Sakuraba, yeah.
Sakuraba. Yeah, I think he did most of Dark Souls 1, if I'm not mistaken. If you compare their sort of two styles, and I know that obviously they collaborated on some of the same games together, and she quotes his music at the end of Dark Souls 3, of course, and that amazing moment from the Soul of Cinder. But his music there are more sort of jarring harmonic changes. I think, and he's really doing it on purpose to tell us something about the characters that were Ornstein and Smo is a particular one where like what happens harmonically in that fight is crazy. You're going from one key to another, and then you feel like he's preparing one key, and then you end up going someplace totally different, which is just perfect for the complete and utter chaos of that
fight. Yeah, terrible.
Of that encounter. Also, another thing I very much like about her music is that the strings, when they're not playing the sort of main part, they often have incredibly intricate things to do, like in the middle of the
in the harmony. Let's move on to something a little bit more intense, just so that we wake up, since the last two songs have been a little bit slower. So you don't know anything. Oh, I'm so excited. All right, so you've never heard Ludig the Accursed and the Holy Blade?
I think that's from Bloodborne. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
No, I don't know anything about it. The only music I've heard from Bloodborne is what you played for me the last time I was here, which was fantastic.
Oh, cello is mesmerizing. It gets better. Oh man.
I mean, that's just awesome. I saw that you had, put out a comment to your community. We're going to do another FromSoft listening party. What do you guys want to hear? I saw a lot of people suggesting Ludig, and I was like,
yeah.
I don't know what it sounds like, but I'm sure that it is absolutely epic, and it did not disappoint. So,
I tell you how excited I was to have you be the first person to show you this piece? This is easily the best piece of video game music ever written.
It's enormous, I mean, it starts big, and then, but somehow they're able to like play with all the different, elements possible for a composer to have it get even more epic when you sort of drop out all the instruments and you have just the chorus, and you'll have another sort of like build up and even a second, even bigger build up.
Yep.
And a lot of this rhythmic play and this is really
big brass.
It's fantastic.
Oh, I can tell your brain that you would like to program that immediately.
Well, another thing that sort of occurred to me is that I can hear when the musicians playing it, when the orchestra and the singers are having an absolute blast, because and you feel this 100% in this track. So now I've heard a grand total of 2 tracks from Bloodborne, and they've both been absolutely amazing.
Let's take a look at something really interesting. One of my favorite pieces actually from Armored Core, this beautiful, painful piece called Someone Is Always Moving on the Surface. I just love that piece. It's so evocative,
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's sort of obviously way more minimalist in terms of style. You have these sort of smaller little figures that keep repeating, but because of how the rhythm is structured, they keep repeating on different sort of parts of the bar. And so it gives the whole thing this sort of like dancey quality, but in a kind of more mechanical way.
Well, and that's really the thing. If I recall correctly, in this game, everybody has been forced to go below the surface. And so this concept, I really picture this barren wasteland of a planet where there's nothing. If I recall correctly for Armored Core, in comments, please clarify for me, the way that Armored Cores work is that they take the consciousness of a human and imprint it into the machine. So even though the human body doesn't exist, the consciousness is then channeled into the Armored Core itself. And it's really interesting because when Armored Core 6 came out, the soundscape completely changed. This one in particular, Cries of the Coral. lot of these are very ambient heavy, and so I feel like that's if you're playing it, that music feels incredibly great. But like when you're just listening to it, I personally struggle with it. But I was curious what your perspective was on that.
Once again, we kind of have a little bit, I wouldn't exactly call it minimalist, but it has certain things in common with certain composers that we would consider to be kind of minimalistic composers.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this sort of like getting into the zone and the flow. For me, I look for, I want to get into the zone and the flow, and there's another kind of music that sort of attracts me a little bit more. So I hear that this is super well done. And I love some of the rhythmic interplay. Certain groups are playing really with, dividing every beat into 4. Other groups are playing dividing every beat into 3. So you kind of have the impression of like clocks that are going, they line up every so often, but not exactly. It almost sounds as if they're going at sort of different speeds. I do like that sort of like mechanical, how does this all fit together kind of.
Yeah, certainly. And like leaning on the synth element there too, obviously represents this giant colossal mech. And I like the naturalistic use of the vocalism as well, which I think really elicits, especially because there's no like lyrics, it's just vowels and upper.
Yeah, just kind of and this sliding kind of, which also is quite effective when you consider like how sort of like mechanical the rhythmic component is. Then to have this one thing that's like super measured, and that another one that is more kind of like sliding in a way that's more difficult to sort of like exactly quantify. And it's interesting also, it's such a different soundscape from the earlier, Armored Core bit that we listened to.
Back to Bloodborne, because I'm really enjoying knowing the secrets that you don't know.
And I really appreciate this sort of like spoiler-free introduction.
I
love to get this taste of the music and still have the entire game to explore. I mean, it's super exciting.
This is also from the Old Hunters, which is very peak OST. This is Lady Maria of the Astral Clocktower.
Wow. I said, now that you mentioned this, I do remember that this was another one that I saw cropping up in the comments quite a lot. Hat tip to your community for suggesting such an outstanding list of epic tracks. Is that one of Kitamura's?
I actually don't know. It's a mix. I don't actually know.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was her,
because lurid violin,
and the fact that at the beginning you have this sort of like counterpoint between two big singing melodies, and also this sort of busy string writing at the and also this feeling of this huge when the chorus comes in, which is such a great surprise. I know that there's a track that she did as well from Dark Souls 3, The Two Princes. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Lothric and
Absolutely enormous. But they saved the chorus for the second phase, because I think the older, stronger one is mute, because he gave over some strength for his little brother who was weaker. He was mute because of him sacrificing himself. And then when they start to fight together, then it sort of reminded me that the composers, they have so many different elements to play with in terms of texture, and when you bring in one element to sort of like really create this release of.
It's hard, because I would love to go into detail about why certain things are done the way they are, because Lady Maria is such a phenomenal character in the sort of plot. But we will save this for our next chat.
I mean, one classic example I think would be at the end of Dark Souls 1. We've been hearing about this character Gwyn. We've pieced together little bits of things, and we've met these those two sort of weird serpent things that each tell us like a sort of different version of the story. And then when we finally collect all the stuff that we have to collect and make it to this sort of crazy place, this kiln that's just sort of full of ash. And when we finally meet this character, who was this like god who linked this first flame, long ago, and now the flame is sort of fading, I kind of had in my mind, okay, I'm expecting some sort of like epic, grandiose boss track. And the music it's phenomenal, but it is so unexpected for somebody who's, when you're going in for the first time, to hear these sort of like, I'm not sure if it's piano four hands or two different pianos playing at the same time. Certainly it's too much for just one piano to play. You feel why the composer made this choice, because of how much weaker he's become, having given over part of his soul to like link this flame, and now the flame is sort of getting, so he's kind of a shell of the person or of the god that he was. And I think that's such a beautiful way to tell the story in the music as well as the general game design.
Let's listen to the Demon Souls main theme really quick. So this is the
cool
theme that kind of started it all. This is from the remake. That's Elden Ring. That's the Elden Ring motif.
Wow.
There's a lot of like sections that kind of give it some space.
Yeah, quite a few super different textures, but funnily enough, that all of which have sort of become kind of emblematic of the series. The sort of the break off, and then the chorus, the one solo voice, and the kind of
then they merge together at the end.
Yeah, that's a really interesting track.
Well, hold on here, because now let's just like take a listen to this motif, because if you click on that, this is the final battle from Elden Ring. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same. I'm actually itching to do a new game plus here for this. With all the like, I have the armor that allows you to like walk silently so that you can't be heard. Everything I can do to play that game in easy as possible. I've got my mimic tier plus 10.
Well, that's the thing about that game. The reason that I downloaded that game, because that was my first FromSoft game.
Yeah,
I had heard that it was coming out because I had read a portrait of Miyazaki in the New Yorker, believe it or not, in 2022. And I remember thinking like, this guy, he sounds super interesting. And remember, my only experience had been trying Sekiro. But one of the things that they mentioned in the article was that this universe was going to be full of some things that could also make it a little bit more accessible for people to sort of to get involved. And then once I started playing the game, I realized immediately like the game is kind of, it's as hard as you want to make it, because there are some super broken weapons, and it's always possible to sort of like call in help or sort of, you know,
yeah.
My first playthrough, I used absolutely everything I could get my hands on to, you know, to make it easier. And then my second playthrough, I was like, okay, no summons, no anything. I'm just going to go through with, Eventually, I tried a playthrough where I was, this is ridiculous, but I was like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish it like this, but I wanted to get a taste of what a soul level 1 level 1 playthrough is. So where you can upgrade your weapon as much as possible, but you're going to have to then go like get some sort of source seal or something like that, so that you can like wield a decent weapon, but you're still like level 1, and like just to feel what that was like. And that was super interesting. I made it through. I got past Margit and Godric and Renala. And then once I got to the Altus Plateau, I was like, you know, this is really getting too intense for me.
I think Radagon is actually probably my favorite fight. Just dodging his big swings and then the earth rising up, and it was just incredible. And I actually love the cutscene too, as Elden Beast sort of emerges out of Radagon. I'll never forget the first time I heard Elden Beast. I just was so blown away by it.
You know, looking back at it, I think we can see that very often the FromSoft, they have a way of doing something very creative with the music for the final confrontation. A lot of people were suggesting that we hear Gwyn, and it's obviously a total classic. So let's listen.
Before we do it though, let's listen to Firelink Shrine, which is something that I think goes kind of under the radar.
I wanted to mention that I saw that in the comments there were a lot of people suggesting boss themes, which is understandable because they're like these big showpieces. One of the things that really struck me playing through Dark Souls 1, first of all, was like the amount of silence in the game.
Yeah.
Because there's, for almost all of it, you're just walking through this sort of bleak universe, and you're still kind of piecing together why things have gone wrong. Like you don't understand the whole story when you start. Yeah. Sometimes the music for example, Firelink Shrine does get slept on a little bit, whereas every time you actually make it back there and you hear this E minor chord, and then this super strange, the second chord, which has like you're almost expecting kind of an A minor chord, but that's not exactly what you get. The violas move up to a D instead. There's like tons of little details that make it just a little bit more spicy and a little bit more more interesting than because also it has to have this feeling of kind of, okay, I'm home, but it shouldn't feel totally peaceful. You can feel that there's something still not quite right about this whole universe that we're in.
Well, let's listen to the Dark Souls 3 OST version of it, which I think is the same.
No, it's different music than in Dark Souls 1, but equally effective.
It really is an uncomfortable rest. And I also actually love the Dark Souls 3 version because it does have that. I think that's Kitamura herself singing. It's so quiet, it's so solemn, especially with the counterpoint with the cello and the violin there. It's so nice how I believe that's a cello and a violin, how they're moving together but opposite at the same time. It's interesting.
I love this music. I also love the music Firelink Shrine from the first. Both of them, I think, are just fantastic at creating this sort of ambiance. What I particularly like about this track are these really pregnant pauses.
Yeah.
This music sort of goes, then it sort of, and then after a breath, it sort of starts up again. And I think it sort of highlights this kind of cyclical idea. I mean, this is obviously something that's super important to the sort of like the philosophy of the Dark Souls sort of universe. This question of sort of cycles and like the age of fire, the age of dark, the linking of the flame or letting the flame extinguish, and all these sorts of questions. And it's a nice way to sort of also be telling this music, or to telling the story in the music in a kind of subtle way. And that, I think, is the mark of really like when a game is really well crafted, where like the mechanics of the game are also kind of mirrored in every element of the game, including the music.
There are so many good tracks in all of these games. We haven't even touched Sekiro, but I did want to give you a primer on all of these, but I do think it's important that we have to talk about, and I know that you know both of these very well, we have to talk about Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, and Soul of Cinder, because the connection there is so, in a way, it's so Wagnerian that however many years later, you get this motif just circling back. And I bet you it was a lot of people's first taste of a motif that we have sort of understood for a while.
This blew my mind. Obviously, I learned it all sort of out of order because I played Dark Souls 3 first. I remember getting to the second part of this fight and being like, whoa, this music, what's such a surprising kind of phase 2.
Yeah.
And then later on, understanding that, so I'm sure if somebody played these games, like started playing them in 2011 or whatever, and then like years later, they get to that fight and then they hear this unmistakable theme and then realize that, so this character, that I'm confronting is sort of like the amalgamation of all the people and all of these cycles who've ever sort of like gone through this process and linked this flame. And like, so in a sense, you're also you're fighting against a part of your own character from Dark Souls 1.
Yeah, right.
Which is not sort of something that's sort of like really made explicit in the game as far as I've understood, but it's explicit in the music.
One of the things that I loved reading is about how emotional this made people. And it was a really beautiful thing that here's a video game and we're, sort of trying to elicit these feelings when we are performing or creating, classical music performances. And yet here's a game that did it essentially so easily. Let's listen to Lord of Cinder and Soul of Cinder. It's just so good.
Fantastic.
There's so many little things in there that just like it could have been just that plin plon, but instead it really has this depth to it in a simple way too.
The way it arrives in the game is just great. You end up in this place, sort of everything is ash and it's super gray and you've been hearing about this character, this god, Lord Gwyn, the one who linked this flame. And then you find this person who's sort of like a shell of his former self. And the music just sort of captures that really perfectly. And so it's really no surprise that this, plin plin plon sort of, became such a beloved, motif in the Souls community. And I had read some comments about this. I think on our first video, there were a couple of people who mentioned sort of plin plin plon, and I was like, what on earth is this? And so when I finally got there, I was like, and also because it's done by pianists playing this, and so it really does have that, and it became such a beloved motif that they brought it back in Dark Souls 3 at least twice. I found it twice in Dark Souls 3.
Twice? I don't remember the first time.
Yeah, first time is in the second phase of the Nameless King.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Because, oh, yes. I heard it there too. And I think that's a familial relationship to Gwyn. That's why.
I don't remember the lore, but I think it was something like he was the good,
Gwyn's, that's right, in both of those.
Like
oh, the Nameless King. Oh my God, what a hard fight. Ugh, that fight was rough.
It's one of those fights where your worst enemy is the camera. Yeah.
Let's listen to Soul of Cinder here then.
Yes, the second callback.
And it just comes out of nowhere like that. It's so teased, you know?
Comes out of nowhere, but at the same time, it's super well prepared musically.
Yeah, the way that
the way we arrive at this cadence.
It's amazing.
It's such a good track, especially playing through it, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2, then getting to the end on New Game Plus in Dark Souls 3. I really did understand the comments from so many people who said it was just such an emotional ending. Whereas the first time I had played through it, I just really liked it. And I thought the climactic bit was awesome. This is another track from Yuka Kitamura. I'm almost 100% sure, although she quotes Sakuraba's music from the Dark Souls 1. It was such a great idea where everything comes together. It took me a couple times but hearing how prominent the bells are at the end of
the bells of the abyss, right?
The bells were super important at the beginning of Dark Souls 1 because, like, the beginning of the games, you have to ring these two bells.
Right.
Another thing I love about that, about what we just heard, is that it is so unlike the other final boss tracks in the series. At least the beginning, that it starts with this sort of like furious explosion of the whole orchestra and the transition, as you rightly said. In a way, it's such a surprise.
It pulls all the way back, and then you hear it and you're like, wait, what and then it fakes you out. I mean, it's like such a genius move. Now, obviously the Plin Plon sort of is Gwyn, it's us, it's all these other things. But then too, when we have the male singer, I actually think that's prominently Gwyn, personally. Like that, coupled with the doubling of the lower, I think it's this lower string where the two kind of I actually think that's Gwyn as well.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. I like this idea.
Well, I can't let you leave without listening to one more piece, and that's the Cleric Beast from Bloodborne.
This is hurting my wallet, Marco, because I'm gonna have to get a PlayStation now. Especially Bloodborne. For some reason, I really do have the feeling that this game is going to be right up my alley.
So that kind of meanders quite a bit, but there's a reason for that. What do you make of that? I mean, that's very intense.
Super intense. I like the soundscape of it. I can feel that in the game, there's probably a lot of reasons for some of these choices that interest me to know kind of why that is.
Yeah,
I love this sort of rhythmically that this it shifts every other time where it's happening, sort of like either on the beat or off the beat. I like this, and this crazy ostinato. I think it's a D, C sharp, E flat, and it's always a little surprising.
It's a little
sort of like
yeah.
You hear this ostinato happens like all over in this track, and it's still always a little uncomfortable.
Did you catch the choral unison singing there? Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Hold on, I made a mistake. You got to hear this. These characters are connected. Laurence, the first Vicar, is connected to the Cleric Beast. I won't tell you how. It's the same choral movement. Yeah. Exact same rhythmic movement.
And we had the same bass.
And there's the organ, and both are optional. They both lead to a dead end.
We have the same motion in the bass. So obviously these characters are connected. I don't know how. No spoilers. I'll discover. Yeah. All of these awesome tracks. And so many from the DLC, that also is amazing to me. That every game, it's like they have saved their
the best for the DLC,
the best quality, and the biggest challenges, but also some of the best music. While they were often in the DLC for Dark Souls 1, the ones I like sort of retain the most are obviously Gwyn at the end of the main game, Ornstein and Smo, sort of middle of the main game. That also I think is just a crazy track. I'm sure everybody who's listening, if they're Fromsoft fans, they know that track. But really, man, so weird what happens harmonically, so jagged, so kind of disjointed, and so it's absolutely perfect for that fight. I was trying to remember. Do you remember this fight? Did you do this?
No, I didn't finish Dark Souls 2.
So this is a particularly successful dragon fight. The beginning of the music is pretty incredible, and I was trying to think, why did this sort of like shock me out of my chair so much the first time I was playing it? And then I realized that almost all of this music in Dark Souls is minor keys because of the sort of bleakness of the universe. And this starts with a blazing G major chord, super surprising, which then twists down into G minor, and then once again G major, then once again G minor, and then the music gets a bit crazier. It took me a couple times listening to it to realize why this shocked me so much, and it was because we hear so few major chords. But man, Marco, I am so grateful for all these great tracks you've shown me. It's super fun to
1 million per 1,000%. I'm so excited, and I'm sure that everybody will be excited when we have you back one more time as you finish up Bloodborne. And now that I've peer pressured you, the PS Pro, I think the PS5 Slim just came out, so I'm sure you can find it somewhere.
For the moment, for me, Sekiro is on the top of the list. That's by far the most fun I've ever had playing the game. And then after that, it's hard to say. I enjoyed them all. I think they were all great. Musically speaking, one thing I really liked about Dark Souls 3 is that the music is super kind of unified in a way. You can feel that there was one main composer for most of those big tracks. But then in Elden Ring, they had like 5 different composers working on things. And that I also think is great because that universe is super
broad and expansive.
Exactly. And so it makes sense to have a sort of approach musically that's like more different styles. Anyway, this was really just super.
It's my fun. Pleasure. It's my pleasure.
I'm so delighted that we both have our
shirt
t-shirts here. Unfortunately, we can't see them with the camera.
Thank you so much, Robert, again, and thank you everybody for enjoying this. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll have Robert back, I'm sure, in the future. And as always, thanks a ton, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, thanks so much for all these great suggestions.
Bye, everybody. See ya.
Bye, everyone. See ya.